Welcome back to another single stop Vita training. In this training, we will go over the basic steps to completing an in-person intake process and the various documents you will encounter. Before we get started, let's just review the requirements to become a certified IRS intake specialist. As we said in our previous training, you must take the two tests required on the IRS Link and Learn website and pass them with a score of 80 or higher. The two tests are the Volunteer Standard of Conduct exam and the Intake Interview and Quality Review exam. For more detailed information on how to take those exams, please review our training video on how to get your Vita certification on Link and Learn. To reduce the chances of identity theft, the first step of the in-person intake process is identity verification. You must verify the taxpayer's identity by asking for a valid photo ID card and their social security card. This must be done for the taxpayer and their spouse if filing married, filing jointly, and a copy of the social security card is required for everyone included on the return. Acceptable forms of ID are state driver's license, a state learner permit, a passport, an employment authorization card, a permanent resident card, and for New York City resident, a New York City identification card. Keep in mind, all those IDs must be up to date. Acceptable form for proof of social security number are original copy of the card, a picture of the card, or a copy of the social security card, the individual taxpayer identification number letter, the ITIN letter that most undocumented residents have, or the current year social security benefit statement, form SSA 1099. Step 2 of the process is income verification. You must verify that a taxpayer's income is within the income limit of the tax site. If income exceeds the limit, you must inform your site coordinator, as each site has different rules and different income limits. Once steps 1 and 2 are completed, the taxpayer needs to fill out the intake form. So step 3 is the intake package and interview process. The intake package is composed of different forms provided by the IRS and the partner site. Depending on the site, a volunteer will be assigned to assist the taxpayer with filling those forms. In other cases, the certified intake specialist must interview and review the completed forms before assigning the taxpayer to a tax preparer. We have Form 13614C, the IRS Intake Interview and Quality Review Sheet. It collects the taxpayer's personal information such as first name and last name, marital status, and other information that might affect the taxpayer's return. The taxpayer is responsible for the information provided on that form, so during the interview, you must verify that all information provided is complete and accurate. If you identified any changes during the interview with the client, you should update and correct the intake sheet. Each income section question includes the form you should expect in parentheses. Verify that the questions marked yes by the taxpayer match the form they brought in to the site. No question should be marked unsure. Verify that the taxpayer understands all the questions on the form and that you understand all the answers. The last page of the intake interview and quality review sheet is Form 15080, used to obtain the taxpayer's consent to make their tax return information available to any Vita TCE site. The taxpayer has the option to decline this consent. Once they grant their consent, the taxpayer must sign and date the form. Next, we have the Singlestop New York State and New York City intake form. All New York State and New York City tax information is collected on that intake form. the first question indicate whether or not the taxpayer is a foreign student. If they are a foreign student, you must inform your site coordinator and they will determine whether the return is within the site scope of service. Next, we have the Singlestop consent to use and disclose information form that allows Singlestop USA to collect non-identifiable information to demonstrate the success and impact of the Vita program. Taxpayers are not required to consent to this form in order to participate in the free tax preparation program. If they do not want to consent, they just have to check the box indicating that they do not consent, sign, and date it. As an NTIC specialist, you're not allowed to condition the taxpayer into granting their consent. Certain taxpayers with dependents that paid childcare expenses during the tax year may qualify for childcare credit. So we have the childcare expenses sheet. Most daycare center provide the taxpayer with a statement of the total expenses paid with their tax ID number. However, if that is not the case, the taxpayer must provide all information listed on the sheet. If the client wants their refund to be directly deposited into their account, or if they have any amount due want it to be taken out directly out of their account, they must fill out the direct deposit form. Only the taxpayer can complete the form or make any correction to it. As the IRS certified NTIC specialist, you can only guide and advise the client on how to fill out the form. The taxpayer is responsible for any information provided on the direct deposit form, so under no circumstances should you provide the client with the bank's routing number. Other Singlestop supplemental forms are the self-employment forms without expenses and with expenses. You must conduct an extensive interview to ensure that the taxpayers who are self-employed are reporting all income, including cash payments received for work performed, income reported on a 1099 NEC, 1099K, 1099 miscellaneous, or any other tax form do not need to be reported on these supplemental forms. The taxpayer should have a summary of their expenses. If they only have receipt, please verify with your site coordinator to make sure that a tax preparer is available for a tally, as that might take quite a while. For expenses, business use of your home is out of scope for Vita TCE program. For vehicle expenses, the taxpayer can claim the mileage as the actual expenses are also out of scope. We also have the Singlestop amendment intake sheet. This intake form is for taxpayers who previously filed with our site and wishes to make some changes to their return. For any other taxpayer who filed with another Vita site or private tax preparer outside of Singlestop would have to go through the entire intake interview process. Last but not least, Form 13614NR, the non-resident alien intake and interview sheet. If the site has a foreign student certification, this form will be given to any foreign student or foreign national paying taxes. To fill out the form, the taxpayer will need their passport. They need to know the date they first entered the country. They also need to know the number of days they were in the country for at least 3 consecutive past years. Please remember that the taxpayer is liable for all information provided during the intake interview. They must sign and date all the form before sitting with the tax preparer. Now that we've reviewed most of the intake forms, let's go over the income tax forms and deduction form. The W-2 form for your wages from your employer. The 1099 INT and DIV, interest or dividend. for interest or dividend from checking, saving accounts, bonds, etc. 1099-G for state or local income tax refund or unemployment compensation or taxable grant. We have self-employment incomes, 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation, and 1099 miscellaneous for other income. 1099-B for sale or exchange of stocks and bonds. 1099-R for pension, annuities, retirement, or disability income. SSA 1099 for Social Security benefit statements. And other income such as gambling winning, Form W-2G. The 1098-T or tuition statement form for tuition expenses and credits. 1098-E for student loan interest deductions. Form 5498-SA for health saving account contributions. And 1099-SA for health saving account distributions. We have the 1099-C for cancellation of debt, 1099-A for health coverage purchased through the marketplace. You should be aware of all those forms as a certified intake specialist. Depending on the taxpayer's answers, the questions on the intake interview and quality review sheet will inform you of which of those tax forms they should present at the site. Let's review what we've done so far. We've verified the taxpayer's identity. We've also verified that their income is within the site scope of service, and we've given them a take form to fill out, and we've verified that they were filled out correctly. Step 4 is the site scope of service. As a certified IRS intake specialist, you must ensure the taxpayer's return is within the scope of service of the site before assigning them to a tax preparer, as not to waste resources and the taxpayer's time. We'll go over a list of the most common out-of-scope scenarios that you might encounter. So the W-2 form wages and tax statement is not in scope for Box 12, code Q, RT, and FF. It's also out of scope if the taxpayer is a minister or a member of the clergy. Form 1099 INT is not in scope if there's an amount in Box 9, if there's an amount in Box 11, 12, and 13 that's greater than the amount in Box 1, and if FATCA filing requirement box is checked. 1099 DIV is not in scope if there's an amount in Box 2B, 2C, 2D, 9, and 10, and if Box 11 is checked. 1099-G is not in scope if Box 3 is other than the current tax year and if there's an amount in Box 7 to 9. 1099 miscellaneous is not in scope if there's an amount in Box 5 and Box 7 to 14, and if Box 13 is checked. Box 1 is only in scope if the site has a military certification. 1099-B is not in scope if FATCA filing requirement box is checked and if there's an amount in Box 1F, Boxes 7 to 11, and Box 13. 1099-R is not in scope for Box 7 Code 2 if IRA box is checked, and for codes 5, 6, 8, 9, AE, JK, NP, RTU, and W. W2G, gambling winning, is not in scope for professional gamblers who use Schedule C. 1098T, tuition statement, is not in scope if there's an amount in boxes 4 and 6 for adjustment for a prior year. Form 5498SA is not in scope if Archer MSA and MA MSA is checked in box 6. Same thing for 1099 SA. If those boxes are checked in box 5, then it's out of scope. 1099C is out of scope if there's an amount in box 3. We're at the end of this training. So let's just review everything we've talked about so far. 1, to become an IRS certified intake specialist, you must first pass the standard of conduct and the intake interview and quality review exam on the IRS website. 2, as a certified intake specialist, you must first ensure that the client is within the scope of service of the site and verify their identity before continuing with the intake process. And 3, you must ensure that all IRS intake and Singlestop supplemental forms are filled out and completed before assigning the taxpayer to a preparer. This process is repeated for every taxpayer being seen at the tax site. So therefore, every completed return must have a completed intake package.